Well, I want to talk about a film that actually did like fulfill something that I didn't even know I wanted. That's Bill and Ted Face the Music, the
Hmm.
third installment in the Bill and Ted trilogy. It is a sequel to the first film, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure from 1989, and its sequel, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, which came out in 1991. This new film follows the return of Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter. They're back as Ted and Bill, respectively. The kind of, they're not the brightest bulls, but they have big vocabularies. They're very nice and
Big
heartwarming. They're just
hearts.
good dudes, big hearts. They're excellent to each other.
Most excellent.
They've, a lot of stuff has gone right for them all these years later. They're in the middle age. They're still married to their wonderful wives, played
The
by Jane
princesses.
Mays. Princesses, of course, from the 1400s, if you watch the earlier films. But yes, Aaron Hayes and Jayma Mays play their wives, and they now have two wonderful daughters. First one is played by Samara Weaving, Thea uh, Preston, and of course Billy, played by Bridget Lundy Payne. Both actresses who are definitely on the rise. Samara Weaving, we've seen in movies like Ready or Not and Netflix's Hollywood, and we've seen Bridget Lundy Payne and other Netflix stuff actually in Atypical. And this movie kind of it's not a direct passing of the torch. We spent a lot of time with Bill and Ted on a new time travel crazy journey where they have to save all of the universe with like the song that will unite the world. And you don't watch the Bill and Ted movies for the plot. You don't watch it for the time travel rules or any of that bogus stuff. You watch it for these excellent dudes and some excellent comedy. Now I'm going to say I'm really bummed I couldn't have seen this in a theater. I was really looking forward to that being the case. I really, really enjoy these films. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, first time I saw it was in middle school. My history teacher invited a bunch of us over to her house, and we watched Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And it was the first time I'd ever seen it. And I was in love with this movie. I was just like, this is so fun. And, like 80s movies can be cool too. And, I liked some 80s movies when I was in middle school. But, I was that typical, kid who just watched a lot of, I was pretty weird about watching classic films. It's like, if it's not in black and white, it looks weird. Like it's too grainy, I was a weird kid. But Bill and Ted definitely opened my eyes and my ears to some pretty bodacious tunes. And I've always liked Excellent Adventure, seen it plenty of times. Only seen Bogus Journey once. I'm not as into that movie, but I still enjoy it quite a bit. It's a lot of fun. The Grim Reaper is in it. I mean, who's complaining? And this third film, I mean, what a way to end this trilogy. It's like, this is like the Toy Story 3 of how they could have done this. Like best case scenario, in my opinion. Now, I understand Will Ashton messaged me and he was like, John, you have the highest review of Bill and Ted Face the Music that I've seen. And I'm a little, he was surprised by this. I think he was waiting for me to be a little grumpy about this movie. And it's not that this movie's gotten tons of like low reviews. I think a lot of people look at this movie and they give it middling B minus, 3.5 stars out of 5, 3 stars out of 5. I'm not, I'm a 4-star out of 5 with this one. I just thought this movie was hilarious. I was laughing and I felt good watching this. And I guess it's because I was just completely on the wavelength for this one from beginning to finish. So I just have nothing but nice stuff to say. Could I complain? Of course. There are things that happen in this movie that are very ridiculous, but none of it happened where I was
But
like,
the movie owns that, and that's what I think this franchise has done so well. Ed Solomon and Chris Matheson as writers have done such an incredible job. I should say such an excellent job with these movies because there are so many films that people talk about like, oh, I don't watch it for the plot. I watch it for this thing. One of the biggest discussions and arguments I had last year was about Godzilla King of Monsters, where they were like, I just going to want to see monster fights. I'm like, that's great. But the movie tries to do so much more than that and fails to do it. It does not just try to be a monster movie. It tries to tell this whole story and it fails at that. So I have a hard time with watching just monsters fight. There also isn't a lot of that in there. But that's just an example I use to say
wasn't expecting Godzilla to be brought into this, but all right.
That's where we are. It was a movie that I got in arguments with people because they would say like, but yeah, the plot's not good, but that doesn't matter. I just want to watch monsters fight. It's like, well, okay, that's cool. But the directors aren't with you. The writers aren't with you in that. They're not trying to just make monsters fight. They're trying to tell a whole story and they're bad at it. And the monsters are kind of fighting. With Bill and Ted, what I love so much is like this plot is ridiculous. And there's nothing to the plot at all. It doesn't make any sense. The time travel stuff does not make any sense. but they never once try to make it make sense. They know exactly what they're going for. They are there to have a good time and to make you have a good time. And that just flows so much into how they write these films. And from Excellent Adventure to Bogus Journey to Face the Music, all of them are just like, they're just there to make you laugh and to make you smile. And they know that their time travel plot is totally bogus. They get it. They don't care. They don't write it to make it make sense. They write it to be fun. And I think those two writers are just some of the best at capturing exactly the tone they want. I mean, I think about Ed Solomon wrote Men in Black, and that is such a unique tone for a blockbuster film. And I just think he really, really gets the fun element of this. And so I agree 100% with what you're saying, because I really feel like this is just a fun, exciting, just heartwarming film. And that is everything it intends to be. And I love how far they went with just like, here's my concept, and we are sticking as hard to it as possible. And it's so great for that.
Charlie, I have to push back a little bit on one thing you said. Everything else you said, 100% perfect, no flaws detected, perfect speech. But there was one thing you said. You said nothing makes sense. False. Dennis makes sense.
Dennis is the best.
He makes a lot of sense. You were introduced to Dennis, and his character comes alive, and but okay. So we should say part of the plot is that these guys, Ted and Bill, and they're like, okay, we got to save the world. So they go on a bunch of time travel shenanigans. And I'll say this is not the strongest part of the film, when they're kind of bouncing around and it's like a Doctor Who sort of thing. And, they're meeting their older selves, and they're, kind of going to a prison, and Dave Grohl shows up. And it's like, that stuff's, it's fine. But my favorite moments of this film, I'll start with some of the more down to earth ones. There's a couples counseling session that is just
very funny,
pitch perfectly written. I think that everything with the very beginning of this movie, it has like the soul of, I tweeted this out and I got a little bit of pushback from someone named Will Ashton. Once again, speaking of people's white whales, I said that this movie is kind of like it's about the Catalina wine mixer from Step Brothers. It kind of takes what's great about that entire scene and just stretches it into a whole movie, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I love about it. But yes, the other element of this film that really does work for me is, first of all, compared to the first two movies, the female characters get way more to do than they did before. And particularly with the daughters here, Weaving and Lundy Payne go on their own time travel journey, where they're kind of creating like the greatest band in history by, picking out all these people. I don't want to spoil who they are, because that's the fun of discovering who they're going to run into next. And it's such a fun subplot. It's one of those cases where the subplot can outshine the main plot. And that's a sign to me that like this movie is definitely what I'm wanting. It's definitely going after something that I'm itching for. And, it all devolves into all the lunacy and craziness, but just when it starts to wear out its welcome, all of a sudden, we're in hell, and I mean that literally. And, there's a whole new scene that is just funny for different reasons. It's funny without going into like the crazy slapstick or the larger than, what comedies do these days to try to make us laugh is so aggressive, and it's so just trying so hard. This movie, like you mentioned with Ed Solomon and Chris Matheson, I mean, they're just, they know how to write jokes that are just timeless, to be sort of to throw a pun in there, I guess, but it does really fit. Like this is the kind of humor that just really stretches to a lot of different sensibilities. It's very 80s in that way. And so, and I was a big fan of this thing from start to finish. Wholesome, it's not good, clean Christian fun, but it's pretty close. And
it's definitely pretty close. Definitely pretty close. You and I talked before the podcast, and I don't want to spend too long on this, because we get it. I have not seen some movies from when I was young or before I was born, but the Bill and Ted movies are ones that I missed. I knew about Excellent Adventure. I'd seen clips and bits, and I knew what happened, but I watched both of them in the last month or two. And I watched Excellent Adventure, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really fun movie. I got why people liked it so much. It didn't click for me like it sounds like it clicked for you, but I enjoyed it. I had a really pleasant time and really enjoyed watching it. Probably last week, I watched Bogus Journey, and I think it's one of my new favorites. I was floored. I almost turned it on again after it had ended. I loved Bogus Journey so much. I don't know why. I think it was just, there's a Bill and Ted Excellent Adventure has a story and a plot, and it's like, it's kind of ridiculous, but we keep it grounded. And then kind of like what happens with Gremlins, just not quite as intense. Bogus Journey is like, we're going to take this movie that was already kind of ridiculous, and we're not going to stop being weird. Anytime there's like is this too weird? Like, nope. And then just blow through that wall. and just there's a whole sequence where they're in hell and it's crazy. And William Sadler as Death is one of the funnier supporting characters in movies like this. I mean, he is so good in both Bogus Journey and in Face the Music. The idea of like going to hell instead of going through time was just very funny because it allowed them to get even weirder. It allowed them to like play with different concepts, and they had their own personal versions of hell, and it just got gross at times. And I loved Bogus Journey for whatever reason, just absolutely crushed for me. And so I was very excited for Face the Music, having just seen Bogus Journey, and I think they did a lot of great stuff with Face the Music. I really, really enjoyed it. And like you brought up Dennis, he was the MVP for a lot of people for the film, and that's the case for me. He did in this movie what Death did for me in Bogus Journey, where you have this side character that like just absolutely makes you roll with every line delivery. I mean, every time William Sadler speaks in Bogus Journey, I lost it.
Well, fans of Barry will recognize him. Well, at least you won't recognize his name.
Yeah.
Anthony Carrigan.
Right. Sorry, I didn't want to say
NoHo Hank.
So sorry. He plays NoHo Hank. And so for me, when I started working at the site, one of the shows I took over was Gotham. I'm one of those weird people that thinks Gotham is actually an excellent show and really truly loves it because it is so wacky in its final seasons. And if you know anything about Batman, the villain Victor Zsasz, and Anthony Carrigan plays Zsasz on Gotham. And he is such a weird, hilarious iteration of that character. And it got to the point in later seasons where they would write more for him because Anthony Carrigan was so good in that role, they couldn't let him walk away.
Same thing with Barry.
Right. And so he went from that to then Barry. And I was like, I can't wait to watch Barry. Even though you have Henry Winkler and Bill Hader on the show, I was like, I cannot wait to go watch Anthony Carrigan in another thing. And now everyone knows Anthony Carrigan, and I'm so glad because Barry really kind of opened up things for him. And it's hard to recognize him in this movie, but he has a couple of line deliveries in the third act that are just incredibly funny. I mean, the time he says a thing about wanting to stay and dance, I won't give any context to that, but that line destroyed me.
He stands out so
funny.
Easily.
Everything he's in, man. Anthony Carrigan, just shout out to Anthony Carrigan. He's the best. He's the best. We're
going to see him again in another film next year, Fatherhood, the new Paul Weitz film that he co-wrote with Dana Stevens. He's in that with Kevin Hart and then I think Alfred Woodard and Lil Ray Howery and maybe Paul Reiser.
And there's going to be more Barry episodes at some point.
Yeah, eventually.
So, more Anthony Carrigan. And anytime, if you have a chance to see something and you see that Anthony Carrigan is in it, you should watch that thing.
Yeah,
that's all I'll say. But anyway, he stole the show for me in Bill and Ted. And just this movie, no matter when this movie came out, I think it was going to be good. It's a really well-written, funny film. But especially right now, I think it resonated so much because everything around us is really difficult. Life is not easy for people, as we talked about at the beginning of the show. And I think this is such a beautiful little ray of sunshine. And it just, all it wants to do, the only mission it has is to make you smile. And that it just does it so well. At the end of the day, like, it's hard not to just deeply love how much this movie makes you smile.
Totally agree. Yeah, this really perked my spirits. And it's like you said, it's like you can point out things and be like, yeah, well, the green screen stuff isn't very good and the future stuff. And it's like, whatever. Like, this movie doesn't take itself too seriously for us to get bogged down in some of the low budget. That's part of the charm. Like, everything is kind of in concert with each other. See what I did there? And in a way that I just think really works. Now, I could see maybe some people saying, yeah, well, I liked, maybe I liked Bill and Ted in this, but like Keanu was kind of weird, without the facial hair, he kind of looks like
I don't know why he couldn't just keep it.
Sure.
But
he has it at one point.
What I loved so much is that it's so clear how much fun he's having. And no one deserves to have a good time more than Keanu Reeves. We're all going to be happy to see him happy. And it's heartwarming to just see him be so excited about something and, just love. If you've watched any interviews with him doing press for this, it's like he is having the best time.
If I had to, because that's the thing. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. He and Winter are they're in these roles and, they're still fun to watch. I think Winter especially, like you can tell, like he just switches it on pretty easily. Keanu, he kind of goes back and forth. It's like, there's a little bit more of a hesitation there, a little bit of maybe of a wariness because his career has been so dense.
And that's part of why I liked Bogus so much is because I think that's Keanu's best performance as Ted Theodore Logan. He's fantastic because he gets to do the evil Ted. And I think he does an incredible job. That's my best performance for him is in that film. But I agree with what you're saying here. Winter was is just so good in this role.
He's still, yeah,
every
he
time.
just fits it so well. I think of the daughters, I think Bridget Lundy Payne definitely outperforms Weaving here. I think Weaving is fantastic. I think she's a great actress. There were times in this movie where, you know, I saw the seams a little bit. I saw her kind of pushing a little too hard to like mimic Winter instead of do her own thing. Whereas I think Lundy Payne, I think she was really able to capture like 90s Keanu in a way that was, it was way more believable, I thought. And both actresses are great. I'll finish out with my final thoughts here. I really enjoyed this movie. This is a B+ for me. I definitely recommend it to anybody who enjoyed the first two films. I don't think people should try to watch this if they haven't seen at least the first one. It'll be hard if you only saw the first one because there's a lot from the second film that gets brought up here. But yeah, this is not exactly a movie that I think is a must see for everybody. You know, it's the kind of thing that you need some of that context. They don't hold your hand much in terms of like what's going on in this movie. Why are they going in time? What is the backdrop of this? Now you got to watch the first two movies to get more of that info. But in terms of maybe more of these films, I think we've got the definitive end of this trilogy. But if we saw Samara Weaving and Bridget Lundy Payne, maybe in like a little spin-off series where they get to go do fun time travel stuff, I would watch it.
I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. Actually, I think I would give it an A-. I get, maybe it's just the time, but I think that this is such a perfect movie right now for what we're in. And like I was talking to my wife earlier, she's not a big movie person, and I don't think she would like either one of the first two Bill and Ted's very much. I think she'd kind of get annoyed by it, but I would absolutely show her this movie. And I told her like, hey, I know you don't like those other ones, because I was watching Bogus Journey going to bed the other night, and she's like, please turn that off. I can't listen to that while I'm trying to sleep. Little guitar riffs and stuff, and they talk so like they talk. And so this one, I kind of mentioned to her, like, I really think you would enjoy this movie. And, you know, people need to smile and people need to be happy. And I think this is such a great way to do that because it's an excellent film on top of that. So I recommend this all the way around. It's not a perfect film, but it's, I think, the perfect film for where we're at. And yeah, A- for me.
Bill and Ted Face the Music is now available to stream on video on demand. I think it's premium video on demand. Technically, it costs about $20 to rent it, $25 to buy it, but it is also available in virtual cinemas. There's a chance you'll be able to get this much cheaper than that as a virtual cinemas ticket. Definitely look online to find some
and
of
they
those
are playing it at
theaters.
drive-ins around you, I believe. I think they're playing at drive-ins. So
I haven't seen any. I hope that is the case.
There is one. They're playing, the drive-in by me is playing Bill and Ted right now.
Okay, interesting.
You might want to leave after that. They're playing Unhinged second, and so you might want to leave after one movie. But yeah, drive-ins by me at least are playing it. So check your drive-in if you got one around you.
Sounds good.